It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Halfway through last season, we saw a bit of a changing of the guard at tight end for the Chicago Bears. So how will they pick back up in this new dynamic with the same two guys still here? This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group, and make sure that you subscribe to the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video content as well. On the show today, training camp previews continue with the tight end position. Again, we're trying to keep our training camp previews a little more interesting, a little bit more fresh, a little bit more analytical in terms of not just going through player 1, player 2, player 3 on the depth chart and going top to bottom on the whole 90-man roster, but going at it from more of a storyline-based approach of how different dynamics will be at play this training camp. We need to start with the Bears officially releasing their training camp schedule, open up to the public again. Fans can come and watch training camp practices once more. So we'll break down some of the interesting things that we can find going through all the dates and times and where the preseason games line up with the practices, joint practices, family fest at a new time. A lot of different quirks we can sort of work out of there before we dive into Cole Kmet, his progress, his development, what we need to see from him this preseason and moving into this regular season, and where Jimmy Graham is supposed to fit into there, what Jimmy Graham might still have left in the tank, and if he doesn't, what the Bears might still have otherwise at tight end, because there are actually 7 tight ends on this roster, but not a lot of experience after the 2 guys at the top. But I want to start with the official unveiling of the training camp schedule, because it wouldn't be a training camp preview if we didn't at least get to the actual schedule, right? We've already gone through the quarterbacks and running backs ahead of knowing the exact details. We've known for a while there that training camp was always going to open at the same time. The NFL sort of regulated it, mandated it this year, that every team who's not playing in the Hall of Fame or, the extra preseason game and aren't playing in the Thursday night week 1 game, I believe it's like 29 or so of the NFL teams are all starting training camp with reporting at the same time and the first practices all at the same time. July 27th will be report day. The first practice will be July 28th. It's a 1:30 p.m. start. That one's going to be closed to the practice for those, closed to the public, For those playing along at home, they will report then on a Tuesday, the 27th. First closed practice is Wednesday, the 28th. First open practice, July 29th at 9 a.m. And as usual, they start off with a string of open practices to really kind of get the fan base into it. 3 straight days of 9 a.m. open practice, come on down, see the team for the first time in a long time. And more importantly, see the team practicing at Hallis Hall. Last year was supposed to be the first year that the Bears would not be at Olivet Nazarene University down in Bourbonnais, Illinois. They indeed were not there, but we couldn't be there either to watch them while they were at Hallis Hall. So this will be the first time Bears fans can come and really watch training camp practices at Hallis Hall. It'll be interesting to see what that's like. I mean, I think it's sad for a lot of Bears fans that have a long tradition of going down there with friends and family. Lord knows I've been down many times, and you kind of get to know Bourbonnais. It's they call it Bear Bonnet for a reason. It's a place where Bears fans take over. I think it's a big water tower down there that says home of the Chicago Bears training camp or something along those lines. They throw Bears logos on everything down at Bourbonnais, and talk to experienced training camp attendees among your fellow Bears fans, and you will hear a lot of stories of specific bars that players used to like to go to after practice. I've heard stories of, Lance Briggs and Charles Tillman and Olin Kreutz and some of those guys in the Lovie Smith years coming out, not going crazy, not getting arrested, not doing anything like that, but being very open to just kind of hanging out with the fans and maybe having a couple of drinks. And nowadays, maybe players will still have drinks, right? It's not like they're not putting any of that in their body, but just a little bit more careful, a little bit more reserved in some of those ways. But you kind of lose some of that, or at least some of those like local staples of knowing when and where players are going to be and being able to sort of have some of those pretty rare, unique experiences that you just don't quite get with some of the same stuff at Hallis Hall. At least Hallis Hall will represent potentially better facilities, better technology. Just generally speaking, it's kind of updated, and the Bears built it kind of for this reason. So I don't fully blame them, but it does depreciate a little bit of some of the fan experience. Speaking of, really surprised to see how they operated the fan experience here for the Soldier Field Family Fest. Every year they hold one practice at Soldier Field so the fans can come and watch in the stadium. And usually I think it's usually a Saturday night. It's always at the night, and it's a weekend night. I don't remember if it's usually Friday or Saturday night. This year, it's August 3rd, a Tuesday at 11 a.m., essentially kind of a similar time frame as a normal practice, but it's a 11 a.m. practice at Soldier Field on Tuesday, August 3rd. To me, that kind of takes a little bit something away from the regular experience. It's fun to go to almost like a prime time. It's not a game, but like a prime time night experience for the kids. And they have a bunch of activities outside the stadium, and they bring select kids on the field, and you can get autographs from the players just like they could at regular training camp. And it's a whole thing where it's a much more relaxed and cheap/free Soldier Field environment for families to come to and not have to cough up $250 for a nosebleed ticket. You know what I mean? Like there's some real value there that I think gets lost a little bit by making it at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, because not everybody can go at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. You either have to take off work, or maybe you have a flexible job that allows you to leave and come back. And depending on what kids are doing, if they've got summer school or summer camp or something, it's hard to go at 11 a.m. compared to like a weekend night when more families might be free. So a little bit disappointed in that as well. And it's going to be different. And different isn't always worse. Sometimes different can be better. And maybe they're onto something, and maybe they'll do some cool things. Maybe Hallis Hall will make for an even more fun experience for Bears fans to be at the Bears headquarters and get to see some of the stuff of where they practice in the regular season, when normally Hallis Hall feels like it's a little bit more of like a closed off fortress where the Bears have all their secret meetings and practices, and then they come to Soldier Field after having left this sort of tucked away hidden space. Trying not to be too negative about the change. I think there's some real potential there for some fun at those training camp practices as well. The good thing is that we will get to watch. The fans will get to be there and see their guys practicing, seeing how some of these young players are advancing, taking those next steps in their careers, including Cole Kmet, who maybe won't have all eyes on him because all eyes will be on the quarterbacks, but a lot of attention being paid to his development as things move forward. We'll try and figure out, okay, what is this role going to look like now in year 2, and what should we expect from him? What is his ceiling, and how much progress should he make this year? Next on Locked On Bears. It doesn't matter that it's July, early July. You can still have a ton of fun betting on this NFL season at BetOnlineag. They have so many great prop bets already for this upcoming year. I mean, Coach of the Year, first coach to be fired, Matt Nagy, in both of those races, believe it or not. Kind of a wide range of outcomes for this season. Bears win total set over under 7.5. And of course, you can already bet on the Bears week 1 game against the Los Angeles Rams. Bears are 7-point underdogs in that one. They even put some like special games of the year that you can bet on. I think is Bears Saints later on in the year. You can lay some money down already and try and take advantage of some of those early odds and see maybe what the odds makers aren't quite seeing yet. So head on over to betonline.ag and sign up today for a free account. Enter our promo code Locked On, and you'll receive a free 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. We've talked recently about Cole Kmet and going to tight end university with Greg Olsen and Travis Kelce and George Kittle and learning from some of those guys. And it seems like he's been in a very good spot to learn from not only Jimmy Graham last year, but now kind of expanding his repertoire with these people. And we talked about how he's really checked all of the boxes in terms of the offseason and the off the field of like being a good person, being a hard worker. And by all accounts, he's dedicated. He's in the film. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. And then it's just a matter of, okay, all of those boxes that he's checked, Let's put those together and create success on the field and start to take those next steps in 2021. Because we knew going in with Kmet that rookie tight ends don't tend to be incredibly productive during that first season. So we knew things were going to be a little bit slow. There's a greater adjustment period for the speed of the game and also blocking and having to know really all aspects of the offense and be used in a lot of different ways. But now is when you start to feel like you need the progress. And it's a question of, okay, how much more is Cole Kmet ready for? And how much should we start to expect from him? And how much of maybe, I don't want to call it, I don't want to call last year disappointing from Cole Kmet, because again, we tried to come in with low expectations, but how much of the limited production that we saw last year was a reflection of Cole Kmet and that natural learning curve? And how much of that was a reflection of the Bears offense as a whole? Of course, the offense wasn't so terrible that no one could produce. I mean, Allen Robinson playing at a high level, right? There's some of this is Cole Kmet being a rookie, but from a scheme standpoint and from a quarterback standpoint, were the Bears in a position to really accentuate a tight end in Cole Kmet's role in this Bears offense as more of that inline, not the blocking purely tight end, but the tight end that's asked to block more than the Jimmy Graham tight end role of the world. So it's sort of a question for me of like, given Cole Kmet's skill set, he's not the most physically gifted tight end. He's not small or something. He's big. He's physically gifted in that regard, but he's not fast. He's not a fast tight end. He's not a burner. He's not one of these hybrid tight end wide receivers like Kyle Pitts drafted this year, or even like a younger Jimmy Graham that you could really line up at wide receiver and be that sort of threat. But we have seen Cole Kmet occasionally at Notre Dame be an intermediate to deep threat running those seam routes, not running away from anybody, but finding some space underneath the safeties, either over top of man coverage or in between zones, going up and making physical catches, right? That's where a lot of his bread and butter is going to be. But last year, he ended up being a little bit more of like a safety blanket kind of tight end. It's the check down over the middle on the little curl, or a quick in or a quick out, or maybe some kind of quick slant. But there were really, I went back and looked, I think there were 3 catches he had of more than 10 yards downfield last year, and only 1 of 20 plus. It was not something he was in a position to do a lot of. And again, how much of that is scheme and Mitch Trubisky and feeling like, okay, the Bears had to switch their offense to play action bootleg rollouts. And those are not necessarily situations that are always going to put the tight end as a focal receiving weapon in your offense. He's going to be more of that check down. It's going to naturally sort of put him to be more inclined in those sort of smaller safety blanket type throws to help your quarterback and to still move the ball overall as an offense. But again, maybe limiting a little bit of what you could do from a tight end perspective. So then coming into this year, is Andy Dalton going to be drastically different with that? I mean, Justin Fields we expect to be, but right, there's some question here about how quickly can things ramp up with Cole Kmet, even outside of Cole Kmet's own skill set. I mean, I think we see him as he can be this big body physical weapon over the middle of the field and can go up the seam and can make some of those, I'd call them contested catches. A lot of times it's going to be smaller defenders kind of draping over him, but that's what the Bears envision when they take him in the second round, plus having him as a capable blocker up on the line of scrimmage. That's part of this too, that he was being asked to run block a decent amount, to stay in and pass protect a handful of times as well. And I think the good thing from a Bears fan perspective is that he didn't show you a lot of real reasons for concern. He wasn't blowing you away and breaking out, but he wasn't lost. He wasn't, out of position. He wasn't bulldozing guys in the running game, but wasn't getting beat badly. Wasn't stonewalling guys in pass protection, but wasn't overly getting beaten badly all that often. And again, in the passing game, you didn't have a bunch of drops or anything. Didn't seem to be largely off on, not on the same page with his quarterback. So, all the sort of baseline things were there. It just comes down to that idea of ceiling and how quickly you start to get there with him, and whether or not it's fair to think that, okay, year 2 now with a new quarterback with Andy Dalton, however long Dalton is going to be there, but then when it is no longer Dalton, it's going to be Justin Fields, and Fields even still is going to take some time, at least some time, to really get at 100% not only comfortable in this offense, but then on the same page with your receivers, including your tight end. So then there's adjusting the quarterback, and there's then adjusting the offense that Matt Nagy also can't completely open everything up with Andy Dalton in his first games in the offense. He's still learning things as they go on, and he can't open up everything completely right away to Justin Fields either when he first takes over. So there's going to be some ramp up for him. So then does that limit Cole Kmet in some way, shape, or form? Is he able to be as accentuated as a middle of the field, somewhat vertical threat? Again, not any kind of expectation that he's going to be this, again, Kyle Pitts is a name I keep coming back to just from that physical build type. He is still going to be somewhat of a safety blanket tight end, but that's a very good thing. It's a very valuable thing to have, and it can help Andy Dalton get out of trouble. It can help Justin Fields get out of trouble, and I think it's a matter of, all right, let's understand that there's room for patience still in the NFL, even though it feels a lot of times like you got to produce on your rookie contract. You got to produce as a rookie. And if you're not stellar out of the gate in your first 2 years, then you're a bust or something right there. I mean, I think we need to see progress from Cole Kmet. We need to see more than the 250 receiving yards, right? Jimmy Graham showed you that there is room for more receiving tight end in this offense, even though, as we'll get to in a moment, Jimmy Graham's reps started to go down as the season went on. But Cole Kmet is who really stepped into that role. And so if they're ready to make Cole Kmet that every down tight end, there's a certain level of expectations and production that will need to come with that role. It just doesn't have to be league leading, it doesn't even have to be, I was going to say 1,000 yards, even that's too high. It doesn't have to be 800 yards. Maybe it's 6. Maybe it's progress and it steps forward that we need to start seeing at training camp. And that means separating on routes, kind of having some of that veteran understanding of zones and where, if you're going between two linebackers, reading the coverage yourself when you're on your route and saying, okay, I know this is cover 3. And so then I know that the linebacker to my right is going to stay at that hash mark. And I know the linebacker to my left is going to go outside of that hash mark. And so then I know the best space for me is going to be directly in between the two. And maybe you adjust your route just slightly to be in a more advantageous position and understand that your quarterback, if he also reads the coverage correctly and understands where the linebackers are going to be, he will also know that adjustment should be made on the route and be able to throw to that spot. That's how successful receiving tight ends, those veterans, really sort of carve out some of that role. It's that mastery of the understanding, knowing that you're not going to outrun these guys, and you're not going to be so shifty in your route running necessarily because you're not fast. You're not slow, but you're not a dynamic athlete. But that doesn't mean you can't still win as a receiver and be a plus advantage player there. And let's start to see signs. We need to start seeing signs of that at training camp in the preseason before that can really start to take off in the regular season, knowing that there are maybe some potential things holding him back from a scheme and quarterback standpoint until things start to ramp up to that next level. We also don't know exactly where Jimmy Graham is supposed to fit in this, if we just pick up where they left off at the end of last year, or if it's going to be more of a 50-50 thing to start, or how much Jimmy Graham even still has left in the tank. We'll try and get a sense of how we'll know and what we should expect from the well-paid veteran, I guess, quote-unquote, backup tight end next on Locked On Bears. Throughout this offseason, the Bears have added some different parts at tight end, some new faces in there, at least at the bottom of the depth chart. And there's no better place we recommend for adding parts than our friends at rockauto.com. They're a family business that have been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. They're here to help you save both time and money. You don't need to go into the chain part stores anymore and talk to the person behind the counter, and they'll ask you 1,000 intrusive questions and they're almost like questioning, like, do you know what you're talking about with this part that you need? Then they punch it in their computer. They go look in the back. They don't even have it, and they have to ship it to you anyway. So what was the whole point of you even being in the store when you could go to rockauto.com, enter in your car's make and model, boom, pulls up all of the different parts for your vehicle, and then you can sort between the brands, specifications, and prices that you prefer. Because some of the chain stores will have different prices if you're a professional mechanic and a do-it-yourselfer, but not at rockauto.com. So head on over, type it into your URL, rockauto.com, check it out right now, and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. You still have time to check out the brand new flavor of Built Bars, Grasshopper Cookie. It's here for just a limited time, and it is so good. It's the chocolate mint version. It's basically their version of a thin mint, but it's good for you because Built Bars are protein bars. They've got the nutrients of a protein bar, but they're not loaded up with all that extra sugar and junk that you don't need. It's low sugar, low calories, high fiber, high protein, and every Built Bar, regardless of flavor, covered in 100% real chocolate. The thing is, these Grasshopper Cookie Built Bars, they're also covered in like grounded up bits of grasshopper cookies. So you get the cookie bits on top, then the layer of chocolate, and then the inside is that thin mint with the chocolate around it that you crave. But again, that flavor has 5 grams of sugar, 150 calories, and over 15 grams of protein. You cannot beat that anywhere else. Delicious taste, and it's good for you. That's the reason why I have at least one Built Bar every single day. Head on over to BuiltBar.com and use our promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. I don't know what to expect from Jimmy Graham this season. Maybe I didn't really know what to expect from him last season either, but at least it seemed like the Jimmy Graham we got in 2020 was fairly similar to the Jimmy Graham that the Green Bay Packers had the year before. But it's like every year we get a little bit deeper in his career, the more you start to wonder where more of the drop-off is going to come. There already has been a drop-off from the 1,000-yard guy we saw in New Orleans and to a lesser extent Seattle, right? He's not the young, spry tight end that he once was. He's going to turn, 34 during this season. He's 34 now. He will be turning 35 in season. Now, to his credit, he's not a guy that has missed a lot of games in his career, certainly not recently. He plays full 16-game seasons, but we saw last season exactly how the playing time situation developed as the year went on. First 9 weeks of the season, he was your number one tight end. He was playing 45, 50, 55 snaps a game as really that true starter. And then right around that week 9, week 10 mark, that's when Cole Kmet's snaps really started ramping up, even regardless as Demetrius Harris totally fell off the map by the end of the year. But by the second half of the season, Graham was down in 30 snaps, 25 snaps, 20. And then even in the playoff game against the Saints, it was down to the teens, the number of snaps he played. Still had a touchdown, still was able to find production, but clearly as the year went on, the Bears didn't want to get him as much playing time, or maybe he wasn't able to shoulder as much playing time as he just does get later in his career and lose some of that durability. Now add a 17th game to your schedule. Because for me, it wasn't like Cole Kmet was so good. He was blowing by Jimmy Graham. Like, he was just so much better that he needed to be on the field more. You wanted Cole Kmet on the field more to try and get some of that development and just get him that experience under his belt to keep things moving at a better rate. I certainly don't blame the Bears for the change that they did make, but just the point was, it wasn't Kmet's performance that took Jimmy Graham's snaps away. It's not to say it was Jimmy Graham's own performance that took his snaps away, but clearly you can look at a graph or just look at the numbers of snaps he played in each week, and it goes down to the very end. And so does he come into 2021 then like completely fresh and ready to start back at the top and we go down the same trajectory this season? Or does he start low and you kind of just keep him low? Because again, doesn't miss games. He hasn't been like that injured to the extent that he can't play, but maybe there's an advantage to delaying it a little bit or spreading him out. If you're going to go back to keeping Cole Kmet as the number one, as it feels like the progression should be taking you there, then Jimmy Graham is going to be your number two, and then he doesn't have to play as many snaps. And maybe if he's not playing 50 and 55 snaps for the first weeks of the season, maybe then you can sort of get more of him later on. If he only has 500, 600 total snaps, if you use fewer at the beginning and then you can use more at the end and have it be a little bit more even throughout the season in more of that second tight end role, less of that wear on the front end. Maybe he can be more effective down the stretch if you're trying to be maybe pushing for a playoff spot down the stretch. Whereas it felt like last season, he wasn't as involved in the offense, and the offense was still getting by just fine, but it just wasn't quite as much Jimmy Graham. The problem is, like, there's not a lot else behind him on this depth chart. JP Holtz, half fullback, half tight end, is kind of your number 3 valuable special teams player, but hasn't proven himself to be a super consistent offensive threat. We've always wanted to see more from Jesper Horsted, the undrafted free agent who had some flashing moments in the preseason and late 2 years ago in the year when they had all those injuries at tight end, but hasn't really established himself as a regular season player up to this point. Then they signed Jake Butt, the former, was he a 5th round pick by the Denver Broncos out of Michigan, torn ACLs, injuries, but still a lot of talent somewhere in there from the guy that we saw that was an award winner in college before the injuries. Maybe there's something there for him to be a potential number 3 tight end. And then they signed Tyrone Wheatley, and they're converting him from offensive line. They have an undrafted free agent, Scooter Harrington. Not really a lot of experience in the depth there. It really is just going to be kind of the Cole Kmet, Jimmy Graham show, and no reason to suspect that they won't be able to handle all of those duties. But if something does happen to one of them, you're going to feel awfully thin at that position. So for now, for the 2 Bears offensive tight end positions, the U and the Y tight end, as Matt Nagy calls them, they've got Kmet on the inline spot. They've got Graham as more the flex tight end spot. And as Kmet gets better, even if Graham slows down a little bit more, you should be able to get the necessary production that you're looking for from that spot. But it's a lot of pressure on Kmet at this stage. And I think at this point for me, it's like as much as the Bears can get out of Jimmy Graham is great. They're certainly paying him a lot of money. I think $10 million cap hit along those lines to have him as your number 2 tight end. So you need to get as much as you can from him. But he even thought about retiring a little bit last offseason. So you just don't know how much longer you're going to get him. But again, we're going to be excited instead about Cole Kmet. We'll keep a close eye on all of his development throughout training camp and the preseason. So make sure then that you subscribe to the Locked On Bears podcast to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We're not quite full 5 days a week for you right now, but as we get deeper into July here, about mid-month, I think we're circling July 19th to start really back up at our 5-day-a-week podcast schedule. So I appreciate everyone who's been following along. Appreciate everyone who's been jumping on over at our YouTube channel. It's a great way to see the podcast and experience how I'm recording it and watch my ugly face talk for 25, 30 minutes each day. I hope you'll keep following along with us. It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad we're getting through this offseason, and I hope somewhere along the way, the Locked On Bears podcast has made it easier for you to bear down.